Today's Locked On Bucks, we take a look ahead to the future. 6 years from now is one of the Bucks assets the best out there on the market, and what could they realistically use it for? Plus, the Indiana Pacers do it again. It's time to start a support group for all the rest of the Eastern Conference teams. Camille and I open up the doors after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. And it's a tough first listen for a lot of Bucks fans who are in the anybody but the Pacers camp. I got to tell you, Camille, and I said this on a different radio show I was on last night, I am convinced the Indiana Pacers are winning the Eastern Conference this year.
It's feeling like it's going that way.
It's a group that doesn't have very many weaknesses, and I was talking about this with, not to turn this into Locked On Pacers adjacent, but I was talking about this with someone else last night, and this is what we have to accept. You can talk about luck with the 4-point play, with the way that the Pacers closed out the game against the Bucks. When it happens multiple times, it's not just luck. It's a tough team that they win on the margins, and that's why I didn't want them in the playoffs, and they're an incredibly tough out. And now the rest of the league, or at least the conference, is starting to see that as well. They're going to the Eastern Conference. I mean, what would be more finals? What would be more surprising? What we've seen 2 times in their last 3 wins to erase a 7-point lead in less than a minute, or the Pacers now blowing a 2-0 advantage where the series shifts back to Indiana? What's the bigger surprise to you? What would be?
The bigger surprise would be them blowing this at this point. To go into Cleveland and win both games, like not just splitting and taking home court advantage back home with you, like taking both games in Cleveland for Indiana, that was impressive, especially given the fact that, honestly, the Cavaliers outplayed the Pacers for like 47 minutes in game 2, and they still just could not figure out a way to put that Pacers team away. They're a good team. I mentioned it on Technical File last night, and my co-hosts were not trying to hear me say the Pacers are a good basketball team because of the hate still in the heart, which I get it. But, man, they're a good squad, and when we continue to have conversations about this Milwaukee Bucks offseason and overall landscape of the East and what the competition is looking like, this Pacers team demands some respect, especially given the fact that they just seem to keep finding a way with different guys coming through in different situations.
All right, so let's get to what we're really here for. We can re-examine the Pacers and the rest of the East in just a moment, but we kind of touched on this, I think, yesterday's show earlier in the week, in examining where do the Bucks go from here? What do they have left to do? It all starts with not necessarily convincing Giannis, hey, please stay here, but just getting the reassurance. Yeah, I'm here. I'm not asking for a trade. And then from there, it does become somewhat easier. I don't think it's as easy as it was in seasons past to get guys like Gary Trent Jr. to take, let's say, a portion of the mid-level exception, to get Bobby Portis to either pick up his player option or decline and work out an extension, to extend AJ Green and things like that. Mm-hmm. But if you get that and you start to bring back a lot of this core, especially the guys we've seen closing games for them, there is one other card that you can play. And I have a feeling it's going to be very polarizing. And quite frankly, Camille, it's a bad job by, I don't know how you feel, me as a host, that I don't really have a strong sense one way or another in terms of how we would feel about this. But that card the Bucks have is the 2031 first-round draft pick. Mm-hmm. That you did not, we talked about this at the time leading up to the deadline of, boy, should you do something like what Phoenix did and break that thing into multiple first-round picks so you at least have some assets? They didn't. And I think it probably serves them much better, because Phoenix essentially turned $1 into 3/4 with those first-rounders that they got back. That 2031 first-round pick, in all likelihood, is going to be a very, very good pick. Like, even if you keep this group together, that's 6 years down the road. Giannis is going to be turning 37 at the end of 2031.
Yeah.
The rest of the guys that we mentioned, you're getting to the point of, well, that would be like 2 more contract extensions with the Bobby Portis. And it's a long way down there. That the reality is the Bucks, whether or not they've exited that competitive window right now, they are probably out of that competitive window when you get to 2031. So that's what makes it incredibly appealing to other teams. So I'm going to put you in a bad spot here and say we don't know what the package is, what you would get back. Scale of 1 to 10, how open are you to trading that 2031 first round pick this summer?
How open? Probably like a 6, maybe even a 7. I might be able to be talking to like a 7, just depending on what the package is. Like before we started recording, I mentioned like I don't want to see that pick just used to be used. Like for example, if it was throwing in this pick just to salary dump like a Pat Connaughton, which was conversation last summer, like, well, attach a pick to that. And it's like, I don't want to see it in that situation. But if the Bucks could find a trade or a deal where if that pick is attached with maybe like a Kyle Kuzma contract, and if you need some other filler there, and you can bring back a player who fits in the mold of what we've kind of identified, what we think that this Bucks team is going to need going forward, which is young, athletic, guy who can play defense, a high-end role player, really, just somebody who can really do their job consistently night in, night out. Then it's like, I can see it because, again, the whole thing about Giannis staying here, he's just said, like, I want to make sure I'm able to compete. Giannis probably won't come out and be as direct as LeBron James was with F them picks or anything like that. But if you're trying to win now, you're not really thinking about what's happening in 31. And although we've heard some people like Steph Curry talk about trying to be a good steward for the franchise, and I don't want the Warriors to, give up all these picks just to put themselves in a position where in 5-10 years they can't do anything. Respectable, but most players don't have that train of thought. And if we are trying to extend the window with Giannis, and using that draft pick attached to someone else can really bring you back somebody who can be important to this team, I'm going to be open to it. It just has to be the right deal.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much where I am. I would even go a step further in that. Look, if you're trading the 2031 first, which the reality is that is going to be a top 5 pick, it's got to be a step above a high-end role player. Like you have to be getting somebody that this guy is going to start and play heavy minutes for us, and we think his pairing with Giannis is what puts us over the top. And you may look at some of those names that will kick around here and think, well, it's probably going to take more than a singular first-round pick to get them. Maybe, but I think, again, the thing is the perceived value of that pick that we heard this past year, teams salivating over that Suns first round pick and almost like, oh, no, don't break that thing up. Like I would have helped you out a little bit for that 2031. It's going to be the same story with the Bucks. And not only that, you could do a pick swap in 2032 because that pick is unfrozen. So that right there is 2 prime assets. But again, you are completely nuking your future and saying we own nothing until 2033. So this move, it absolutely has to work. And I think that's going to be a big challenge for a lot of Bucks fans. And again, this is all conjecture, but even for the front office, if it were to get to that point, to say this has got to work. And the last few moves we've made to this scale have not worked. So are we sure about this? That's going to be the challenge. But those 2 things, that 2031 first, and then being able to throw in the 2032 pick swap as well, and say, look, you got a chance that these are back-to-back number 1 picks that you're getting because of where we think the team is going to be at that point, and in all likelihood before 2031. So that is what the Bucks have to play. Now, what could they turn that into? So what are some realistic things that you could look for? Well, we talked about something that was kicked out there by David Locke on Locked On Jazz earlier in the week. And the more I started to think about it, the more I thought, that does make sense for Utah. And that would give them that type of asset or assets if it's a pick swap as well. that they desire. So what are some of the contracts that you could bring back? I don't know that it really matches what I said of, hey, it's got to be a great player, but I think there is certainly some interesting options that are out there in a deal between the Bucks and the Utah Jazz. So we'll take a look at that one and some other options that the Bucks could potentially have here coming up after the break on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about our friends at Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, none of us wait. You move on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and text from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. And their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off for your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That is openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no additional charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So let's start with this Jazz deal that was and again, this wasn't any sourced reporting by David. I think it was a question from one of his listeners of, hey, what if we bring Damian Lillard back home collegiately home to Oregon and get some assets from the Bucks to take on that contract for him, offload some guys that we don't want. And I think all of us heard that and thought, well, great. What assets, right? Mm-hmm. Well, those 2 picks, that pick and pick swap that we mentioned are assets that I think are the type of guy like Danny Ainge is always in the market for. And the initial deal that he kicked around was something like John Collins, Colin Sexton, and something else for Damian Lillard. To me, that's a non-starter. If we're including the 2031 first-round pick, we're not taking back John Collins and Colin Sexton as much value as especially Sexton may bring. We're talking about, in all likelihood, 7th and 8th guys on your team, and that's not what I'm trading those assets for. So if this were to be an open communication, the deal that I would craft with the Utah Jazz, including that 2031 pick and probably the 2032 pick swap, would be, we'll send you Damian Lillard, you give us Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, and if you need something else to fill out salary, send us that too.
Yeah, I mean, listening to Locked On Jazz and David Locke kind of throwing that out there, the idea behind it for the Jazz is like just trying to get more assets, right? And he was actually saying it as like a way to try to take as many assets from the Bucks as possible. Yeah. And I listened at first, I was like, you're thinking like maybe 3-4 first rounders is what David Locke was proposing, especially if Lauri Markkanen was in that trade, because he's like, that's the value piece right there. Like if it is the trade that you mentioned before, where it's like Collins and Sexton are really the headliners, then not as many assets. But he was saying if Markkanen's in there, the Jazz are going to want a lot of assets back. And it's like, well, the Bucks don't have that many to give you. So it is going to have to be like that 31. Maybe you do another pick swap again to try to trade out some of the other picks.
Knowing Danny Ainge, you're definitely doing another pick swap.
Right. Like you gotta throw some other things out there. But Lauri Markkanen is interesting. And then you get off of that Damian Lillard contract of a player who, I will say again, I think that his year this year was a bit underrated at this point. And it's just like he's going to be 35, 36 coming back from a Achilles injury. So I can see having hesitation around, well, we got to pay him $54 million. So let's try to find a different way out of this. I would be open to it. It's probably not like a trade where I heard it and I was like excited about it, but I would definitely be open to it because Lauri Markkanen provides some upside there for sure. And then if you can get Walker Kessler, you get another center on your roster. Can't really stretch the floor too well, but you get a defensive center right there that could be really helpful. So it's something I would be open to depending on how many assets the Jazz wanted to try to attach to that. And if I remember correctly, too, Markkanen just started like the first year of
He
his
just
extension, right?
signed. Yeah, he was ineligible to be traded last season because he signed that extension very late in the summer. So he's paid through 2029, and when that season ends, he's going to be going on, I believe, 33 years old. And look, by the time the Jazz would start to get out of this rebuild and field a competitive enough group, Lauri's just going to be getting into the exit of his prime. So it was always one that, yeah, you're signing this guy to trade him, that he doesn't match up with your timeline. Now, I will also say he was great. As soon as he arrived in Utah, he averaged nearly 26 points per game. He did it efficiently. He was named an all-star for the first time in his career. He was very good last year, as in 2 seasons ago as well. This past year, not as much. The efficiency numbers dipped. His three-point shooting really dipped. I don't know how much of that was the environment that was around him and the fact that the games played were, I believe, at an all-time low. Yeah, the lowest of his career, too, where you saw more and more of you have knee soreness and you're going to sit out these next couple of games here. And you get the sense that was part of the extension, too, of, look, this year's probably going to suck for you because you're good. We don't want you out there all that much. We want to get a good pick, so we'll pay you if you accept this.
Yeah, it's probably the way that it went. And so here's a question that I'm thinking of now with throwing out this hypothetical trade of sending Damian Lillard to the Utah Jazz with assets, bringing back someone there. Do you think that would be more beneficial for the Bucks to have, Markkanen on the team, being able to play for the beginning of the season, knock on wood, assuming nothing happens over the summer with his health? Or do you think that if the Bucks do transition this team into a team that operates with Giannis being the guy who really pulls the strings here, who he's the guy initiating the offense, he's bringing the ball up, Achilles injury, 8 to 12 months of recovery time, generally speaking, for that. So at the earliest, you're looking at Dame coming back December if things go.
I think at the earliest you're looking at coming back maybe shortly after All-Star.
So, okay. So like, let's say he comes back 2026 at some point. So you're playing like the first half of the season without Dame. Do you think that a Dame coming back, again, off of an Achilles injury, if he is tasked with playing a different role than what we initially thought that he would be playing in Milwaukee, with now it's Giannis initiating, you are more of an off-ball guy, even with that injury, which might suit him better coming off of the injury. Do you think that version of the Bucks could be more successful than a version of the Bucks if they had a Lauri Markkanen next to them with, Walker Kessler, as we just kind of proposed?
I'm never going to doubt Damian Lillard. But the big hangups that I think all of us have to have is the age, the severity of that injury, and the fact that, we talked about this a number of times. The thing to keep an eye on, not just for Dame, for any smaller guard as they start to transition later on in their career, is how frequently are they getting to the rim? Are they still, drawing contact? Are they still taking it into the paint and finishing around the rim? Or have they just kind of settled into, I don't want to deal with that anymore. I'm just going to take some shots. I'm going to take mid-range and threes. And it dipped a little bit from Dame last year. I don't think it was a noticeable dip that you continue to see him get into the paint and attack the basket. That is one of the, I won't say doubts, but questions that I do have for a player that's coming back at that age from an Achilles injury is, does that force your hand into, I can't really do that as much anymore. I don't have quite as much burst, so I'm going to have to be an outside shooter. That I think that just starts to limit that pairing and what you can really do with that duo and all other players with Dame on the floor. That's the $1 million question. The other part is, in this hypothetical trade, is it more important that not only do you get a guy that, we said it can't be just a role player that you're getting back. It's got to be a guy that at worst, he's your sixth man, but he's playing starters minutes and he's closing games for you. But also the fact that in this deal, Lauri Markkanen is under contract, as we mentioned, just started the extension. He's out there through the 2029 season. So even as things start to move into the next era of Bucks basketball, you've still got this guy of, okay, here's this piece that we can build around, even if that means we're building the 7, 8, 9 seed. Or if, he keeps up this level of play, and as we said, that contract, by the time it ends, he's just starting to exit the peak of his playing prowess. This is something that we can move on from as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just kind of interesting to think about, and like we're gonna have a lot of time to kick around these thoughts, but for me, like you said, like the Achilles injury for Dame, it's unfortunate, and especially seeing the reports coming out after the Bucks had their playoff exit. There were rumors like, hey, if things didn't work out for the Bucks in the first round, they would have explored Damian Lillard trades this summer with him being healthy. The Achilles throws a wrench into that because the trade value is not going to be there. So if you are looking at Damian Lillard trades, you're going to have to attach an asset to that. So then the question becomes, with the Bucks having limited assets, are you more inclined to try to attach that asset to a Dame contract to just move on from this particular era of Bucks basketball? Or are you looking to attach that asset to another high-end role player that the Bucks have, like maybe a Kyle Kuzma who has a declining contract going forward, and you mash up the salary that way to bring somebody back who's making $30 million or so a year? Which pathway offers you the highest chance of success in the short term, with Giannis's window being here? So that's the piece of it for me when thinking about the 2031 draft pick of like, I'm not sure which way I would want to go at this point, because again, the Achilles is going to be really tough for Dame coming back. I don't want to count Dame Lillard out, but the age, the injury, there is a lot to consider with that. And then also just seeing, like, even with how great these two players have been, it just didn't click in the way that people were expecting it to.
Yeah, and just looking at the general landscape of the league, that's the Jazz are the only team that stand out to me where you could hypothetically do a deal like that and say, look, we know what your timeline is. We know you're not interested in winning. Take this pill for us. We'll give you these two assets and give us something that helps us stay in the spot that we're currently in, or hopefully better, that we're currently in right now. I mean, the Jazz are the clear favorite for that, of how Danny Ainge likes to build teams, what Danny Ainge values. You think about a team like the Thunder, they're already in the competitive landscape. The Rockets are already in the competitive landscape. So there's just fewer and fewer of these types of teams that you would look at and say, well, this could potentially be the move. Let us know your thoughts on that, or what else is out there that you've dug into. Remember, the cap matters. So if the team, like somebody suggested to me, what if you did the same thing and traded Dame and your first rounder in 2031 to the Suns for Kevin Durant? Well, you can't, because Dame makes slightly more than Kevin Durant, and Phoenix is in the second apron. So you got to keep those things in mind as well. But leave your thoughts in the comments, and we'll get to those on some upcoming shows this week, and get a pulse for what you guys think the future of this team is, and what to do, more importantly, with that 2031 first round pick. We talked a little bit about the Indiana Pacers to start the show, and you can't help but get this feeling of deja vu all over again if you're a Wisconsin sports fan. Camille will explain what we mean coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Okay, we're a long way from getting there, but I think most of this group is a crossover Brewers and Bucks fan, and you're well aware of the, hey, look at what teams that beat the Brewers in the playoffs go on to do. Last year broke the curse, right? The Mets were the first team to not at least reach the World Series after beating the Brewers in the postseason. But it was a long history of that. Every Brewers postseason appearance, to be exact. And then you start to get this feeling of disappointment setting in, frustration when the Bucks lose in the first round of the playoffs 3 consecutive years. And you think, well, wait a minute. Let me revisit those playoffs again. So you lose in 2019 Very disappointing. We thought that was devastating. Boy, if you
didn't know any
could
better
hop
yet.
in a time machine and get back to 2019 and say, you find this devastating, maybe stop watching sports because it's going to get worse. You lose, blowing a 2-0 lead in the conference finals, lose to the Raptors. They go on to the finals and win the NBA championship. You lose in the bubble in 2020 to the Miami Heat. And look, this is another one that the further removed I am from it, the more I have accepted it wasn't just the Giannis injury. Miami had your number. Miami was a better team. Miami was winning that series. It wasn't just the bubble. I think there were cracks and there were flaws that we did not have to see addressed with that Bucks team because of how dominant they were in the regular season. And as we made the comp the other day about that Bucks team in the Oklahoma City Thunder this year, there's a lot of differences in the playoffs to the regular season where you have guys like no offense here, but George Hill that you trust to hit open shots in the regular season. That's different in the playoffs. And I think that was a big piece of what we saw. But you lose to the Heat. The Heat go on to the NBA Finals that year. Then you win the title in 2021. But then you lose to the Boston Celtics in 2022. The Celtics go on to the NBA Finals. You lose to the Miami Heat once again in 2023. The Heat go on to the NBA Finals. You lose to the Pacers last year. They only go to the conference finals, but we heard from Joe Mazzulla and others on that Celtics team. That was the toughest opponent we faced. And you lose to the Pacers again this year. And I already said at the top of the show, I have felt this way for days. I think the Pacers are going to the NBA Finals this year. So it has once again become this situation where you want to go far in the playoffs, get the Bucks in your bracket and beat them.
That's the wild part of all of this and watching the Pacers. Like, as I said, I had to just admit they're a good basketball team, and watching this playoff run and trying to take away like playoff lessons of like, what do the Bucks need to do better to get farther next year? What type of
games,
team?
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
win 4 games. Let's start there.
That's the easiest answer right there. And it's like, what does the construction of the team have to look like? And what does this Pacers team do well? And it's going to be a team that's going to continue to be in the Bucks' way going forward. And watching the way that they were able to find that momentum in the fourth quarter to have that comeback, like I was looking at the score, like, man, they're down. Like,
it was a mirror image of Game 5 against the Bucks, where you could just sense, and I talked about this on the post-game show that night too. You could see you're driving down the road and you just see the needle keep dropping closer and closer to the E. You could see the Bucks running out of gas, and you could see the same thing with the Cavs, down 3 players, asking Donovan Mitchell to shoulder as much as he did. They just ran out of gas, and that Pacers team plays at that pace. They do not. And again, they just win on the margins. I think that's a big credit to Rick Carlisle and his staff.
It is. And the thing with this Pacers team as well is that I talked about with the Bucks, where I was like, this Bucks team does not give up. Like, you can have the Pacers down 20 and it does not phase them because they've been here at this point. And to see Tyrese Haliburton be the one to get the big offensive rebound, bring the ball out, hit the big 3 to put them in the lead. It made me think of the overrated comments that we've been hearing with, he was voted by the players the most overrated player in the league. And just the Bucks fans' feelings about it, because I feel the way about the Pacers too. But I have so much more respect for this team now than I did before, and watching them as how they're playing against Cleveland. And I know people are going to say they can't keep getting away with this because of the injury luck that they have been getting on this run here. But again, we've mentioned it before. You need a little luck, and I'm not going to disparage or talk down on any team that gets that luck along the way. Like, if you do something with it, you do something with it. Like, without that, the Bucks, when they had a championship in 21 themselves, like, they caught some breaks along the way. You got to be good. But the Pacers are a team now, when I'm thinking about the offseason in the East next year, where I'm like, hey, Indiana's one of those teams where it's like, I'm not sure if they're still in that same tier as the Bucks. Because for a while, I felt like Bucks and Pacers, same tier. But now it feels like the Pacers have definitely ascended to a tier above where the Bucks are.
I mean, respectfully, yeah, I think that's clear. Depending on what the Bucks are able to do in this offseason, but they beat you in the playoffs 2 straight years. They reached the conference finals last year. They're 2 wins away from doing it again. Yeah, I would say it's not only are they at a higher level than the Bucks, but they should, quite frankly, be put up there with the Celtics. That it should be Cavs. I think there's going to be a lot of questions that exist with the Cleveland Cavaliers in that we talked about some of the familiarities that we saw with the Bucks and Thunder. Same story, keeping it together, and we're just going to change the coach, and this will be the answer for us. There's a lot of questions there. You've seen Indy do it. That I think going into the next season, depending on what happens with teams like the Bucks and the Celtics too, are going to have a lot of questions to answer with their roster makeup. The Pacers have to be one of the first 2 or 3 teams you mentioned in the Eastern Conference at this point. I get how unlikable Tyrese Haliburton is to Bucks fans.
And he is unlikable.
Yeah, I mean, would you like is what both Dame and Giannis said, to be humble in victory? Yeah, you would. But let's be honest, Camille, if Tyrese Haliburton was on the Bucks and doing that, we would Tyrese oh man, coolest athlete in the world. He's such a killer. He's clutch. So we do have to take that into account as well. But yeah, I have so much respect for the Indiana Pacers, for how tough they are, for how much of a killer Tyrese Haliburton is, and how they are just so well coached from Carlisle on down that they do not panic in these situations. That it's tough to watch for a team that's beaten you in the playoffs 2 years in a row. They've become the new Miami Heat for the Milwaukee Bucks. But yeah, it feels like this is going to be a magical run for the Pacers here through this postseason.
It does. It does. And I picked the Pacers in that series against the Cavaliers after going back and forth with it, even before all the injury stuff came out with the Cavs. And now it's setting up to have a repeat. Again, we're jumping the gun a bit, but it's like a repeat of the Eastern Conference Finals from last year.
We're jumping the gun a bit, but I don't think we're jumping the gun with the Cavs. With the Pacers part, it's 2-0, and the series goes back to Indy. The injuries that the Cavs have, I mean, I don't think we're going to see at least 2 of those guys on Friday when the series resumes.
Yep.
So, and you lose Friday, it's over.
Yeah.
No team's ever come back from 3-0. I was talking with somebody in Cleveland before the series started and said, I think the Pacers are going to win in 6, and kind of got laughed at and pushed back of like, look at the numbers of the Cavs and blah, blah, blah. Like, guys, you just have to experience it. I don't think you understand it from afar. You have to be in it to really experience what this is like and how this team doesn't put very many weaknesses out there. They play at their own pace. They win on the margins. Like, this is a much tougher out than I think you're giving them credit for. And it's not just the injuries for Cleveland. They whooped them in game 1 where you were just missing Darius Garland. So it's a good team. And I think we're a couple of days away from coming to grips with the fact of, man, the team that Bucks fans hate most appears to be, at the very least, headed to the conference finals, if not even more.
Yeah, and that's going to be a hard pill to swallow, especially looking at the Bucks, and it's like, dang, we haven't been out the first round in 3 years now, and now it's table setting a summer where conversation will be around Giannis for sure, but going into next year, the question is going to be just simply, can the Bucks get out the first round? Like, that was a question this year, and it's going to be louder next year, and it's going to be something this team's going to have to take, because they're not going to be a favorite in the East, I don't think, next year, unless this summer shakes things up in a way that is very unexpected.
The Bucks?
Yes.
Yeah, and you trade your 2031 first for Anthony Davis.
Right. So something weird happens, then it might change it.
Yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments about those trades, what you do with the 2031 first round pick as well. As we mentioned, we're going to have Frank on the show Friday to get his end of season thoughts, and we'll probably run our first of several mailbags throughout the summer sometime next week. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.